Okay, good day guys. We're here in Durban, South Africa, as we mentioned earlier, and I've got a good friend of mine here with me, Patrick Kawana. Patrick's a Zimbabwean guy, but he's in here in South Africa consulting to some big fund management companies and so on. Patrick and I came across each other through Berin Gilfillan. You guys know Berin, you've heard me talk about him before, and he's done some of the big films on our website. Berin heads up ISOM, International School of Ministry, which is the biggest online video Bible college in the world, and we both were on his Berin's Marketplace module. You might remember the module was built around KI, and then he got some other significant speakers in. Patrick was one of these legends who came in to speak. Okay. And then we caught up again in San Francisco at the Christian Economic Forum last year in 2017. And we had a lot of good chats there and so on. So we've kept in touch ever since. But I want to just read you Patrick's bio, because he's a significant guy, he's a high achiever, he's a great thinker, he's able to articulate stuff really well. And as you know, when we're talking about creating sheep nations and so on, it's really all about influence, affluence to a large degree as well, so money and so on. A lot of stuff needs funding, but having a good orator on board is so good. I mean, that's why Obama got in. You know, his policies were rubbish, but he was a great orator. Okay, so and I'm not saying Patrick's policies are rubbish, he's a legend, but here we go. Patrick Kawana is the founder of Crossover Transformation, an organization focused on accelerating business and economic growth by creating new relational and transactional economic structures. I can't even spell half that stuff. His passion is in developing and working with leaders and organizations that are committed to unlocking the vast economic potential of Africa by building new sustainable systems of inclusive wealth creation and prosperity that will benefit all Africans. So you can see the trend of sheep nations coming out in stuff that Patrick's doing, even though he may not have coined it in that phrase, but it's the basics, right? He utilizes biblically based principles that are Holy Spirit inspired, with the ultimate aim of pointing people to Christ so Christ can point them to the Father. Patrick has extensive expertise working in culturally diverse environments. He's gifted in vision casting and developing trust and unity among diverse people to enable greater success in strategy development and execution. Previously, Patrick was in the IT industry and held several executive positions at HP, Oracle Corporation, and Computer Science Corporation. In 2005, he entered the entrepreneurship environment, which is where I think we should all be, and was involved in several startups. He's also part of the transformational leadership. Team at the USA-based FSH Group, and serves as Africa Coordinator for Unashamedly Ethical on the board of Foundations for Farming, and on the board of Foundations for Farming. So Unashamedly Ethical, that's Graham Power.
That's
right?
it, yeah, that's okay. Graham Power.
I met Graham. Graham's an incredible guy, runs a massive organisation. I met him at the European Economic Summit in Amsterdam in 2014. So these guys are all over these top-end economic summits. Patrick runs an online business platform called Co-Creating the Future, and is contactable on patrick@crossovertransformation.co.za. Okay, so I wanted to talk to Patrick about Zimbabwe, because here in Africa, obviously there's a history in every continent, and in this continent especially, there's a history of slave trading and plundering of the people and so on. And they had the colonial era where they were plundered again, and now since then, largely been decolonized, but the corruption is rampant. Okay, and it's plundering its people, much like first century Palestine, where the Jewish people plundered their own people. And that's what we have here in Africa today. And we think that if we can create one sheep nation as one example, as one benchmark for the rest of the continent, they will follow, because the economic distress that's coming through, not just the social distress, but the economic distress, is going to implode in these nations. And many of you would know that some of these nations have imploded over the years already. And it's when that pit experience, when it gets to the bottom, that we, the Christians, can have an opportunity to move in and create a sheep nation. When everything's distressed, when everything's at the bottom, when people are so desperate, that's when we can reach their hearts and their minds and change their cultures. Zimbabwe is close to that point in time. Okay, and Patrick's a great thinker and has some plans and so on. So that was why I wanted to interview him, so you guys can get a bit of a picture of what's going on. So Patrick, with that, can you give us an idea of what you think just the state of Zimbabwe is at the moment? We're in November 2018. You guys might be watching this down the line, but how is it at the moment? Economically, socially, politically, what are you thinking?
Yeah, I think, Dave, I mean, the statement that you've just made in terms of how Zimbabwe has gone through that trajectory of absolutely getting to the bottom, I think that's where Zimbabwe is right now, and therefore it presents the perfect opportunity for people who really carry a solution to come in. We've gone through 37 years of President Robert Mugabe's rule. I believe November, December last year, 2017, was a catalytic time because we saw the removal of Robert Mugabe, which was a big political move in the country. But I think what it also did, it also brought Zimbabwe to the realization that there's actually a deeper rooted issue that goes beyond just a president who's been in power for 37 years. I think certainly there's been a lot of destruction during that period where you've literally got a nation, literally imploding within itself. But the fundamentals of that imploding come back to absolute greed. It comes back to absolute selfishness. So where we stand right now is a country with a new president in place. The same political party has been voted back in. There's a certain level of optimism, but what Zimbabweans are facing, the reality of what they're facing is an economy that is completely decimated. I think unemployment is hitting the 90% mark right now.
Wow.
So it's just completely crazy. You can't have a functional country that has 90% of its people unable to find meaningful work. And therefore, as much as we are probably at the lowest of our points, we desperately need the injection of something that's different, that's going to bring people back into economic activity, that's going to start to change the socio-economic trajectory of the country.
Yeah. That's amazing. Guys, when you consider, the lectures that we've done on first century Palestine and the Holy Land when Jesus got there, the 90%, just over 90% of the Jewish people were were feudalized, okay? The poverty was unbelievable. And here we have this similarity of 90% unemployment in Zim. That's crazy stuff. Patrick, with your knowledge of the Bible, you're a pretty switched on, mature Christian. I've heard you speak before at the economic summits and so on. You understand the concept of sheep and goat nations from Matthew 25. Yeah. Would you say that Zimbabwe is currently pretty much an epitome of a goat nation in terms of, economically, politically, socially, the whole lot? That's pretty well where it is, would you say?
Yeah, absolutely. I think Zimbabwe is absolutely sadly enough, a full example of a goat nation, where everything has literally collapsed.
Yeah.
Again, even if you look at from economic cycles, you see how God talks about cycles of multiplication, fruitfulness, fullness, and Zimbabwe has been a absolute case where that has been completely opposite.
Yeah.
We've literally eroded everything there is to erode, and I think what's really sad is that Zimbabwe is such a wealthy country when you look at the resources. I mean, the amount of resources that God has blessed Zimbabwe with is quite astounding, from mineral resources. I mean, even during the Mugabe era, you hear about how 15 billion worth of diamonds revenue was plundered and lost, and that's revenue that could have just been injected into the economy and taken the economy on a very different trajectory. So for such a wealthy country, it's a complete opposite of it's just a dichotomy. It's completely not aligned with what a nation that has been blessed with so much should be producing and should look like. So absolutely. Yeah.
Excellent. So as you gathered, I'm teasing out from Patrick the current state of the nation. So here you have a nation blessed with so much mineral wealth and so on. the 90% people, they are also an incredible resource. They workers. They migrate to go and get jobs in other countries, and when they do, they're amongst the best workers. So they have a good work ethic. These are good guys, good guys and girls. But because of corruption, because of greed and self-centeredness, this concept of the Babylonian concept of maximizing self-interest at the expense of everybody else, that's prevailed in the hierarchy and in the cartels, the wealthy, affluent families, both black and white. You end up with a plundered nation, okay? And this is so common in Africa. And we think that if we can get a benchmark sheep nation, change this one over, God always takes it to the bottom, right to the pit, so that there's so much of a testimony to come out of that. And so that's the next stage, I think, of this nation. So Patrick, what can be done to change it? What do you think can be done to change this? You've mentioned a little bit about different thinking and so on, but what is that? What do we do?
Well, Dave, I really believe it starts off by fundamentally changing the mindset of the people, because I think you talk about the plundering, you talk about the greed, the corruption. I think fundamentally one of the things that we have fallen into the trap of is thinking that we live in a world that has scarce resources, whereas God has actually designed the earth to be literally a multiplying machine if we can only steward it well, and if we can enable as many people as possible to bring their gifts and their talents to the table and to work them in an economic system that leads to the building of prosperity for all. And I think what we see in Zimbabwe is a stronghold in people's thinking, where they think that the only way for them to prosper is if they can take it away from somebody else. And if they can oppress somebody else, or if they can steal it from somebody else, because the mindset is all around there isn't enough, and therefore let me hoard as much as I can, which is completely contrary to the way that God has designed economies to work. So I really think there needs to be a lot more education just to help people transform their thinking and find the real truth around how the economy works, but even how wealth creation works. And I think if they can understand that and realize that the more people that they bring into the economic cycle, the more that they can bless people and help people get on board, the more you actually generate the system that multiplies everything for everyone. And somehow we just have to get the mindset to change. And then once the mindset changes, I think we will see the behavior begin to change, and we'll start to do things differently that bring people into the system rather than try to keep them out.
So that's good. You can see that the human spirit, you cannot suppress the human spirit. People have tried throughout history. The reason Mugabe left, it wasn't voluntary. Okay, people took to the streets in their tens and hundreds of thousands because they had had enough. They could no longer survive. So they literally took to the streets, and Mugabe was ousted. Here comes now a new election coming up, and if there's more of the same, it will implode. Ultimately, it will implode. The objective of us as kings in the kingdom of God is to catch it before it implodes, if we possibly can, and introduce the culture of caring and sharing. The culture that Jesus brought to first century Palestine, what he demonstrated to us is how to do this, how to get rid of the corruption, strategically cut off the tax collection system is what he did. What he's saying to us is strategically think about how will you get rid of corruption in this country. If we can go, we and Patrick and others form discussion groups and so on, and plan to actually go in there and teach people the counterculture, but prove that it works. So you've got to prove that it works, so that the greedy people, the corrupt people, you can say to them, guys, if you don't do this, it's going to blow up. But if you do this, you'll do well. You'll make plenty of money, and you won't have the threat of an insurrection all the time on your doorstep. Okay, so that's the objective, that's the strategic thinking. And Patrick, my last question I wanted to ask you is, do you think that can be done? Is it possible?
Dave, I absolutely believe it can be.
Excellent.
And again, what gives me encouragement all the time is that it doesn't take the majority to start to bring the shift. You almost just need a remnant, a small group of people who will really catch this and begin to exert that influence, but as you correctly said, who will take the theory and begin to do it. You know, we need a couple of business people in the Zimbabwean economy who can really begin to employ this, really begin to implement it, bring in government. I think, I have no doubt that when governments start to see the results, they will jump on board. So it's just a case of getting that remnant going, the results come in, and I have no doubt we'll have an avalanche of people coming in. So I'm excited. I really believe we can do it.
Absolutely. That's good, you know, and in closing, the reason for the focus on Zimbabwe is because it is a pretty important state in Africa, but it's got a small population relative to here we are in South Africa, which has got nearly 60 million. It's much harder to convince a big population. It's much easier to convince a small population. To reach a tipping point in Zim, we probably only need to reach about 2 million people, somewhere around there, maybe a bit more. What's the population there, 20?
It's probably about just under 20.
Yeah.
Just under 20.
So literally, we only need to reach 2 million people, change their mindsets, and you will end up with a tipping point. So the challenge is not as great as it would be here, but if we can create that benchmark, and it would be an awesome benchmark because of the natural wealth in the area and because of the unemployment. Combine those two, and you've got an engine room of Africa, you know. So we're going to stay with this. I'm going to talk to other guys and girls out of Africa, out of Zimbabwe rather, and hopefully by the end of it, you can see why we are so focused on this particular country, and see if we can't create the first sheep nation in Africa that's ever been done. So thanks for listening. God bless you guys. Patrick, thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Dave.
It's been good to catch up with you again.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, and we'll see you guys soon.